Hello and welcome to Why Design, the podcast where we explore the stories behind the founders and senior leaders shaping the world of physical product development. I'm Chris Whyte, your host and founder of Kodu, a recruitment company dedicated exclusively to physical product development. Over the past decade, I've had the privilege of interviewing remarkable people in this space, and their incredible stories inspired me to create this podcast. In each episode, we dive into the journeys, insights, and lessons from founders and design leaders driving innovation in people and planet-friendly hardware. So let's get started. In today's episode, I'm joined by Seyi Sosanya, co-founder and CEO of Gravity Sketch, a collaborative 3D design platform transforming how teams create, visualize, and communicate ideas across industries like automotive, fashion, and product development. Seyi's career journey spans engineering, design, and entrepreneurship, taking him from drafting construction plans in Portland to leading cutting-edge product innovation in London. His background in mechanical engineering, combined with hands-on experience working in manufacturing hubs like Pegatron in Taiwan, shaped his unique approach to product development. In this episode, we explore how studying at Imperial College London and the Royal College of Art helped Seyi merge technical precision with creative thinking, ultimately leading to the creation of Gravity Sketch. What started as a student project is now a world-changing design tool used by leading companies worldwide. You'll hear stories from Seyi's career, including his time designing at Jaguar Land Rover, crafting custom pieces in New York, and scaling Gravity Sketch from a bold idea into a pioneering design platform. If you're curious about how engineering meets entrepreneurship, what it takes to build a tech company from scratch, and how design can redefine how we work together, this episode is packed with insight and inspiration. So let's get on with it, shall we? Seyi, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So, Seyi, I'm going to do my best to introduce you and set the tone for what we're going to talk about. Let me know if I miss anything. But Seyi, you started out studying mechanical engineering at Oregon State before moving to the UK to study innovation design engineering at the RCA in Imperial College. But before you moved to London, you spent nearly 2 years working in Coventry in Jaguar Land Rover's innovation team. And it was around the same time that you co-founded Gravity Sketch. Then in 2016, you took the leap to go full-time, and you've been building it ever since. So for anyone unfamiliar, Gravity Sketch is a London-based company specializing in intuitive 3D design software that allows cross-disciplinary teams to create, collaborate, and review designs in a completely new way. Its platform serves industries like transportation, industrial design, apparel, and even film, enabling the creation of 3D models, scenes, and artwork through immersive virtual reality environments. Notably, Gravity Sketch's tools were even used in the environmental and set design for Avatar, The Way of the Water. We'll walk through your career, focusing on your journey with Gravity Sketch, how it started, who it's for, how it's evolved, the challenges you faced, and what's next. So Seyi, why design? How did you get into the design and product development, and why?
Yeah. Thanks for the intro. That's quite helpful to kind of set the stage.
That's all right. Yeah.
Design, I mean, lots of factors contribute. I feel like from a very young age, I've always been like a bit of a visual learner. I think we all can kind of remember as designers getting our first Lego kit. But for me, I can even remember further back Lincoln Logs, which is I think it might be an American toy, which was just a piece of wood with 2 notches on each side, and you can kind of build them up together. It's quite cool. I had these in my grandfather's house, and we would play there every time I went over. And I just remember like this idea of like being able to make something from seemingly nothing was always an appealing idea for me. And that led me into more of the making world, where I spent a bit of time in construction, framing houses, and that kind of paid my way through engineering school. And then after engineering, studying mechanical engineering, I focused a lot on structural analysis, fluid dynamics, and so forth. And I realized that a lot of it is analytical rather than making. So I decided to jump straight into fabrication and manufacturing, and I actually worked with a industrial designer in my hometown for a bit. Learned a lot about woodworking and scaling up furniture production. And I think those kind of stages of making for a purpose, then making for actually making a physical thing like a house, and then making for evaluation and analysis so that the future thing can be manufactured at scale or manufactured to prevent any kind of catastrophic accidents from happening. Gave me a good sense of, I guess, a balance between the world of design and the world of making. And some people think that those two worlds are combined, and I do agree in several ways. But I think there's also this tendency to design a lot without actually making. And for
Mm.
me, industrial design tends to embody the making and the design in one. So that's kind of something that I felt like just really felt natural to me, and it took a long time to find that. Unfortunately, I spent a lot of time in the engineering world and spent a lot of time in the manufacturing world, but all of those things contributed to creating a much more balanced approach to design when I finally did step into the design arena, and I think contributes tremendously to how I operate the business here today. We take a very much a design approach to building a business, but also a design approach to how we interface with customers and support our customers as they transition to new ways of work.
Awesome. No, that's brilliant. And we were just saying before we hit record as well. You've had in your early days before you came out to London. I didn't mention it in my intro, but you spent time abroad. Obviously, kind of consultancy early on in your career was invaluable over in Portland. But then you mentioned you went out to Taiwan as well. So how did you end up getting out there?
Yeah, I was working in New York right after graduation, trying to find something that kind of filled this creative and manufacturing need that I had. Manufacturing mainly because I had these really great CAD skills, so I could develop something really quickly and send it off to be milled or injection molded or something like this. And design because I wanted to be a part of problem solving. I realized that several designers, not all designers, could kind of create something pretty close to being manufacturable, or maybe manufacture at small production. But when you scale up, there's challenges that arise. And I wasn't finding that in New York. I mean, in hindsight, New York isn't really the best place for that. Maybe somewhere in the Bay Area or, in Middle America is probably a better place for that type of profession. But I was like, where do things actually get made? It's definitely East Asia. And I was initially looking at Japan, and a friend of mine who I went to high school with encouraged me to investigate Taiwan a little bit, and started to see that there's loads of things coming out of Taiwan, and essentially it is kind of the brainchild for that part of the world when it comes to precision manufacturing, or maybe more of like an innovative approach to manufacturing. That little island's responsible for a lot of things that kind of we use on a daily basis in terms of the genesis of the technology. And now, when it comes to the tech landscape, semiconductors are pretty much that's the breadbasket of semiconductors
Yeah.
in the world is Taiwan. So that gave me a lot of conviction moving out there and learning a little bit about how to manufacture instead of in the hundreds, as I was learning in the States, manufacturing in the thousands and hundreds of thousands in some cases, which was completely eye-opening for me.
Yeah, it's incredible experience, isn't it? Like I say, it's so easy to jump straight into SolidWorks or Rhino and create beautiful looking kind of products, but actually there's a disconnect there between what it looks like on the screen and what it's going to end up like, and that's a really important bit, because it doesn't matter if it looks great if you can't make it, then what's the point? It's a bit like marketing as well. You can have a great product, but if it's not marketed well, no one's going to know about it, so it's not going to sell. But in terms of so that the experience must have been really really invaluable for you. And then it looks like you went back to New York after that. So you spent a year out in Taiwan, came back, and if the timeline's working out here, um,
Yeah, I mean it's kind of spotty because I did a bit of freelance as well. I was out in Taiwan
yeah,
for a total of about 3 years or so. So
okay,
yeah, there was some time there where I learned a lot. I was in factory visits like weekly, which was really cool.
yeah,
Um, and before jumping straight into coming back to the UK, I kind of wanted to get the speed of Western culture again.
mm,
And I spent my 20s in New York, and I figured going back to New York and in my late 20s, early 20s in New York, coming back in the late 20s, and um, trying to get really stuck into design before coming and doing a design degree in the UK. And so I worked for a really well-established furniture designer, Stephen Burke, and really helped him with, I guess, taking some of these rough ideas and like trying to formalize them a little bit before we sent them out to Italy and France for furniture manufacturing and scaling up. And I'd done that prior to going to Taiwan, so I knew a little bit about how to arrange and position, different materials for different manufacturing processes, as well as alignment of the kind of technical drawings. What I learned was the importance of color, which I'm not very strong at, and the importance of presentation and storytelling. And that really helped me to kind of get a springboard into the academic sphere of design, which encompasses a lot of storytelling and a lot of pitching of your ideas.
Absolutely. Well, we've had on this show several guests kind of talk about storytelling in design, and it is, yeah. It's no matter what the product looks like, it's the story, it's the experience, it's kind of what the user gets out of kind of that story and the journey they go on using the product. So that's awesome. So you've done furniture, you've done fabrication. I guess you've done all sorts of different things in the consultancy space as well. What brought you to the UK then? What triggered that move?
Yeah, so I was pretty content in Taiwan. I really enjoy the work. I really enjoy the culture, exposure I had to, things that are manufactured and, hitting the shelves like in 6 months' time and being privy to a lot of things like that. But what I wasn't content with was it felt like it was a one-directional relationship with the client where, you know, here we have this laptop we want to manufacture. On our side, we'll go and source out all the bits. We'll try to make sure it's to spec. But there were some brilliant ideas that came out of the design team I worked with in Taiwan, and it didn't feel like their voices were included when it came to, hey, maybe we should iterate on this, or potentially if we move in this direction, this may help with what you guys are trying to achieve. It really felt like, well, hey, look, we just need this manufactured by this date under this price point. I think, I was the only foreigner in the office, and I felt that, maybe I was going a little bit against the culture by speaking up in certain cases. Thankfully, I had a really amazing leader, and she was like the department head, and she was very encouraging of these ideas. But ultimately, what I found was there was missing a role somewhere in this world of, the client, the design team, engineering, and that role was someone like that would integrate all of these different voices together to communicate and propose a solution that took into account everyone's, I would say, motivations and motives. And so I felt like, okay, maybe there's a discipline out there that blends engineering and design and is in the job title somehow. And not just design engineer, because design engineer, I worked as a design engineer, and it's pretty much you take the design and you try to make sure it's ready for manufacturing. But something in between, I didn't know quite what that was. And so I started looking at different master's programs, and I came across the Innovation Design Engineering program at the Royal College of Art here in London. And it's a joint course between Royal College of Art and Imperial College. And if you zoom out far enough, you start to see that that has a pretty long track record of successful entrepreneurs and creatives that come out of that. And I think the biggest name out of the course, probably when it was a slightly different name, is James Dyson. And I felt like the Dyson brand really does embody engineering and design and user needs and so forth. So yeah, if this individual was able to kind of build his career and his empire on the back of this academic environment, I think it would be a great foundation for myself as well. And it really felt like it was blending the two worlds together, because you're partnered with Imperial College's mechanical engineering team and your mechanical engineering department, and you're partnering with the industrial design department at the Royal College of Art. So you have both of these worlds working really closely together. And I didn't think I would ever find something like that. I was really surprised. I was looking at different schools in the Netherlands and New York and so forth, but London was the place for me.
It's got a great heritage and a fantastically rich alumni as well. I've had several XRCA and Imperial students on the podcast. So I dare say when this goes live, you'll probably see a few messages from ex RCA and Imperial graduates.
Yeah.
So it really does show how small the world is in design. But that's wonderful. So so you ended up at Jaguar Land Rover then in innovation, and around the same time or before that, you were sowing the seeds for Gravity Sketch. So I don't know what you want to talk about first, or whether you just want to, maybe.
Yeah. One definitely came before the other. So I was challenged by the department head back in the day when I was kind of at RCA, and I was kind of thinking through some of my solo projects, and I was very fixated with this object that would embody these principles that I was exploring. And he said, it's great that you have this really strong conviction, but the problem with your thinking is that you are the bottleneck. So in every proposal of solo projects I would offer, or even in some of my teamwork that I did, I was always proposing this thing that would have all these elements of consideration. And so he really encouraged me to think about tools and building tools for creatives or tools for people to use. And that there's another project I worked on, which was a weaving machine. And that was all about providing the tools or the platforms for others to then build on top of. And so when it came to our group project, this was a team of us that were working on this idea of how do we help people get into the digital environment really quickly, visualize their ideas in 3D, and have that clear communication so that everyone's on the same page before they go into the next stages. Because we all know how long it takes to work in CAD. And if you get something wrong, you kind of already dedicated so much time to it that you're really reluctant or reticent to go back. And so Gravity Sketch was really born out of this group project where we had industrial designers, engineers working together to try to solve this communication gap that happens between the two disciplines. And so we had a very crude prototype that we started to show around the school, and eventually we shared at the graduation show. And that was born into Gravity Sketch. Now, it was way ahead of its time in many senses of the. Sorry, it was way ahead of its time in many ways, primarily because we were developing it on the Oculus DK1 and some augmented reality glasses out of France that were military grade or something like this, right? So it was just like a really cool proposal. Maybe a company like Autodesk would pick it up and build on top of that, or maybe we would go and work for these companies that are making tools to help accelerate the adoption of this new technology that was coming out. And graduate in school, you're so much in it, like, yeah, surely I'm thinking this way, so the whole world's thinking this way. And as soon as you graduate, you realize that there's a huge delta between your enthusiasm as a student and staying at the front end of technology as a student to the real mechanics of business, the real mechanics of a world that has to kind of rely on several layers of collaboration. And with that, my co-founder and I, Daniela, we decided to go and work at Jaguar so we can stay in the country, firstly, because we didn't have visas. She's from Mexico, I'm from the States. But also, secondly, so we can get some exposure to a different level of design. And for me, it was really eye-opening because automotive, the primary value proposition to the end customer is the aesthetic appeal. Now, of course, like functional, your car needs to move from 0 to 60 in a certain time frame. It needs to house X number of people or objects or so forth. But if we all wanted fast cars, we would be driving F1s. And if we all wanted to move people or objects, we'd be driving buses. So, in the consumer space for automotive, it is really about the design, the aesthetic, and how you as a consumer map your socioeconomic status to that. And it was the first time that I had ever been in an environment where the C-suite is acutely aware of that. Like leaderships at the highest level within these organizations, they know that design moves the needle for the bottom line of the business. And that was really, really empowering. And that gave us more conviction in Gravity Sketch because here you are in an environment where you're making something that is extremely expensive. The customer, I guess positively could maybe only buy 5 or 6 of these in their lifetime, and they're going to make their decision based on the value that it gives them emotionally, as well as more so than the practical value. And then within this segment, it's very hard to get someone to move from a brand to another brand. So if you get into one, like for example, my mom loves Jeep. She's never going to get a different vehicle than a Jeep. I mean, I'd be super surprised. So these companies would have to work super hard to position and design and get something in front of her that like she really can see herself moving from one brand to the next. And so that's the fight that they're constantly playing, and the whole company is aligned on that. And that was really exciting because the amount of money that's put into design is just astronomical compared to consumer electronics, compared to furniture and so forth. In the automotive space, it's just another dimension. But the tools are still relatively fragmented. So we spend tons of time in Photoshop or actually physical sketching,
Yeah,
tons of
clay
times,
modeling.
yeah, tons of times back and forth in kind of the PowerPoint presentations. And then of course we work with the CAD team, and then eventually we get a one-to-one scale clay model, and we have to do many of those. And so just on a simple back of the envelope calculation, of course, I would love to get the formal figures, but I wasn't having that level of visibility of the organization. But I was able to calculate like 5 clay modelers, 4 weeks, full-size clay model, roughly the cost of clay. We're looking at $250,000 just to kind of create one full-size clay model. And per vehicle program, they're making multiple of these, right? And so it was like, okay, actually, if you were able to allow someone to visualize one and communicate on one, just to align on the aesthetic, that would in itself save the company a tremendous amount of money and also accelerate the design process, by multiple weeks. And so after a few years there, we both had built up the conviction that we would want to go full time and build this out. There's a couple other factors that came into play. Mark Zuckerberg bought Oculus. The launch of the Vive with the controllers, the HTC
Yeah,
Vive with controllers, and then obviously the first Oculus Rift headset with controllers as well. We all of a sudden had an input device. We had a very cheap, affordable piece of hardware that we can port the experience through. I would also like to acknowledge the open communities out there that were sharing things about how to develop for Unity, open source libraries that we can build on top of. So there's a ton of stuff that kind of aligned. And I think that's really what gave us a lot of conviction. It didn't feel like we had to push a boulder up the hill, potentially when it comes to sales, potentially when it comes to getting people to change. But when it came to accessing the technology and facilitating this experience, there was a lot of things that were just right there in front of us. And if we hadn't done it, someone else would have. And in that journey, I talked to lots of folks, Microsoft, Adobe, Autodesk, and it felt like they all were acutely aware that this would be a future state. But again, they're looking at selling, thousands of seats versus a dozen or 100. So I think that for them, it's more of a waiting game. Wait and find out what comes of this technology.
yeah,
And also the problem that we're solving maybe is smaller in its scope than the problems that they're solving across their whole portfolio of products. So
yeah. I
it will
guess
take some time still.
a lot of these companies wouldn't want to be the first to commit money to developing tools or software to do what you're doing. So they'd wait for the small player to do it and do it well, and then maybe acquire them. Or you see that across lots of different industries. It's very risky to be the first into the industry or with the change, isn't it? But potentially the most rewarding. So that's cool. So obviously, I'm not a designer. I'm just kind of privileged to work with designers. Have done for over a decade now. So I've got a good idea about some of the tools, but I don't use them myself. So in layman's terms, then perhaps you could describe Gravity Sketch. And am I right in thinking it's a software platform as opposed to a hardware platform? You're not producing. You're using kind of other VR and AR tools, but you're enabling through your software the interaction with other CAD software. Have I got that right?
Yeah, maybe I can talk about the job to be done for a designer, and
Yeah,
I guess that will give a little bit of credence to what we're trying to build. So a designer has to imagine a product that has no physical representation and communicate that effectively to someone else who may not have all the context and awareness of what the designer has. So there's really 4 things that a designer needs to keep in mind when thinking of developing a new product or in the process of developing a new product. The product's functionality, so how it's actually going to work mechanically and just purely how the product will work. The ergonomics, so how the user is going to interface with that product. The brand heritage, so how that product and the aesthetic appeal, how that product embraces the company in which is going to represent that product. So designing something for, designing something for IKEA versus designing something for a Chanel or Louis Vuitton, you can see that there's a very big differences if I'm going to design a piece of furniture or an object for either one of those. And so those things need to be considered from a design perspective. But also the designer needs to consider the scalable manufacturability of this and serviceability, right? So how are you actually going to manufacture this at scale? I'm sure a lot of companies have played with the idea of creating something as grand as a Cybertruck, but you're thinking of it, stainless steel panels is extremely expensive for a company to do that. Also, there's probably very few suppliers in the world that can help scale up and manufacture that. So that's what a designer has to kind of consider and think through. And in that process, they're using tools to communicate, and all those tools are visually based, and then they eventually get into some physically based tools. And so to visually get someone who doesn't have the tools of perspective and understanding of and hasn't been trained into sketching and reading perspective drawings to understand what you're trying to convey that has no physical counterpart yet is a very big challenge. Like that is the gap that the designer needs to cross. And eventually they can then open a budget for a professional modeler and then eventually fabrication team to make a prototype and a sample. And so the person that's designing and concepting the product is very rarely the person that gets to sign off and say, here's a budget to go out and make the product. And so there's a ton of communication that happens in between that. A large portion of that is happening on flat screens. Flat screens lack depth. Our brains work with stereoscopic input. So when you're looking at a screen, I can roughly pattern match the background and how far you are from the back of that wall there, but I don't know that for sure. And so I might try to manufacture something that's maybe 2 feet too wide, and that just isn't going to work for the budget, isn't going to work for the manufacturing team and so forth. And I think these are the small things that could cause projects to delay, could cause faulty products, and so on and so forth. And so for us, what we wanted to try to tackle was there's this world of 2D, which designers are extremely capable in. There's this world of 3D, which several designers know how to leverage and take advantage of. But primarily when it comes to injection molding, there's very few industrial designers that are creating injection molding cavities for milling, right? And everything in between that is communicating on flat screens. And so if problems arise, that draws out a project or that creates a faulty product for the customer, the final customer. And so when VR came around, it's like, well, here's a perfect platform that gives you your third monitor. That's taking for granted that everyone has 2 monitors on their desk or a monitor and a Wacom tablet. And this monitor allows you to see things stereoscopically and validate things and communicate with one another so that you're aligned before you get to a physical prototype. And so we are a software layer. We don't build additional hardware. The price of an Oculus Quest is, I think last time I checked, there's a $300 version of it, right? Or 300 pounds.
So cheap now, isn't it?
Super cheap.
This kind of tech.
I could buy 3 of them for the price of my cell phone. And, this is a window into the 3D space. So I create something or I have a rough idea. We have authoring tools on our platform. You can also import models. So I can import the engineering specs. I can do a quick doodle. I can invite someone in. We can then collaborate around that and say, actually, we want to move this or change this. I can then surface out a portion of it. And I can take all that information. It's all ready downstream to be imported into a downstream CAD package. And so that's kind of the key here is it's really a communication platform. Functionally, as you described, you can author in it and you can move that seamlessly through a variety of different file formats into your CAD package for further working or even just using as an underlay to get a more accurate CAD representation back as opposed to ping-ponging back and forth. But for the vast majority of our customers, including the likes of Ford and Adidas, Puma, they spend a tremendous amount of time talking in the 3D space to align on a lug pattern for a shoe sole or the the dash of a vehicle and the kind of the sight line for the occupant, right? And these are the key decisions that are very hard to make if you don't have stereoscopic view working at full scale or a physical model. If you don't have those things, it's really hard to make these decisions on a 30-inch monitor or an A4 piece of paper.
That must be so awesome for designers, to have, especially when you talk about that automotive context of kind of building a clay model, a life-size clay model. Even as a clay model, I don't think you can sit inside it. You've kind of got the outside view, and it's like you've got another prototype to make to get the dashboard and the cabin, but you could literally have it all in the 3D space you could be in. It's that's incredible.
There's something tactical, there's some tactility around clay that I really enjoy, and there's tactility around sketching that I really enjoy. But there's an information gap, and there's a time that we can't afford in industry often. And so our goal would be, we don't throw away the pen and paper, but we spend a little bit less time in pen and paper because we know that it has diminishing returns at a certain point. Your sketch is only as good as the person that can read it. And we love clay, but obviously clay takes time. And so by the time the clay model is ready for evaluation, I might have changed the idea. I may change the design. We might have gotten some new inputs from engineering team. And so it's this sweet spot in between these two worlds where we just need to quickly validate, check things out, and then inform the downstream tools. So for the time being, I don't think that there's this huge, like, let's wipe all of our tools out and adopt this new technology. I think AI is pushing into that a little bit as well. But I think there's this time in between these two worlds where it's like, hey, look, let's spend a little bit less time doing things that we know we struggle to get alignment around, and let's try to like accelerate the time that we know is going to take to getting these models, and let's try to get an accurate model as soon as possible versus like half a dozen clay models and only 2 or 3 that we really like. And I think this is a great tool to accelerate that. And over time, you start to incorporate natively 3D from the onset. You might incorporate some AI, and then the beauty of clay model, I don't think will ever go away. But in certain cases, you may not need a clay model, especially in the more practical cases and when you're building more utilitarian type of vehicles. So there is a world where the digital workflow is robust enough, seeing things stereoscopically, validating things, even running simulations in 3D is going to help, tremendously accelerate the workflow for designers and product development teams.
I'm interrupting this episode to share some exciting things happening around why design. At the core of this podcast are the incredible design journeys my guests have been on and where they're heading. And these journeys stem from the relationships they build, the communities they're part of, and the amazing achievements that come from collaboration. So beyond the podcast, we're hosting regular online huddles and quarterly meetups in the UK, with plans underway for an annual gathering in the US. We're also running hands-on workshops both in person at makerspaces and online to connect and inspire people in physical product development. So if you'd like to join us or stay in the loop about upcoming events, sign up at teamkodu.com/events or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
So this rewinds the clock slightly here. So obviously you and your co-founder decided. Did you say it was Daniela?
Daniela, that's correct. Yeah.
So you both decided to kind of commit full time, leave Jaguar Land Rover. Did you have any funding at that point? What were you kind of stepping into, kind of away from kind of the security of a full time role?
Yeah, no funding. Bit of savings. We hired our third co-founder, Daniel, who joined. He was a game developer, and so he was able to really take this kind of rudimentary thing that we had and make it a bit more of a product. But it was really a labor of love and living off of savings. So lived off our savings for as long as we could, bootstrapped it as best we could. There was a lot of government grants. I'd have to give a lot of credit to our first major grant, which was the Royal Academy of Engineering. There's a fellowship there for entrepreneurs with engineering backgrounds, and
cool.
I was able to land that grant, which is incredible. It was a good chunk of money that helped us get going, but also a prime location in Piccadilly area to work, and so we were able to have a place that we can go and work and build some of the essence of the business. The school also gave us a bit of capital in exchange for equity, so this wasn't necessarily a grant, but there was a bit of investment from
First taste of
the
investment.
university. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that helped with securing the IP, but also a bit of a location to work as well, and some advice on how we might go out into the world and start really promoting this. One thing I think we were lacking in the academic sphere was just some practicalities of how to position and build a business, and so we needed that time to really better understand and learn. And that was kind of the maybe like the MBA period for us of just like learning about business and how to set up a forecast and a pitch deck and all that stuff.
Yeah, which kind of brings me back to my next question. Was earlier on in the conversation you were talking about kind of product designers kind of having to tell the story about something that doesn't exist yet, and you're creating that thing, and you've got to take people on that journey, that story. For you, you're pitching an idea that's never going to be a physical product, is enabling physical products. How difficult was that, coming from obviously your physical product development journey into all of a sudden kind of creating this software business and this tool business? How did that work for you?
Yeah, I would say it's a constant dance between the things that I'm drawn to naturally and the knowledge that no single design that I make will ever have the impact of this product that we're working on for the design community. So I can make an amazing product, but and historically, furniture, consumer electronics, tabletop objects, things like this, they've been awesome products, but I don't think they've really had an impact on the design world. And just knowing that here's this idea, gravity sketch, where this could fundamentally transform design. It may not, but I think it has a huge chance of doing so if we are able to move quick enough and get enough people to start to shift their mindset around creation, that it could change the way that design's done forever. And so it's more of a service to design in many ways. I think this is a bit of a responsibility. Once you create something and you don't see it through, it's kind of lost into the history books. And so I do struggle a little bit with, hey, I would love to be in a factory again or in a wood shop again and just exploring what's possible, and also new manufacturing technologies and so forth. But also the same problems will arise in communication, and that's where design struggles the most. And by spending this portion of my life really helping this thing come to fruition and become a reality, I just can't see an alternative that's going to drive as much value to the community that has given me so much. So it is a struggle, but I'm able to also take my design thinking and apply it to business. There was a point in time where I was so obsessed with the product, and product design is kind of where I wanted to stay in the company context. But the company needed money, needed funding, and needed business, customers, so forth. And kind of dawned on me that I'm not designing a product anymore. I need to be designing a business holistically. And so applying a design mindset to business was what I started to kind of index into. And you see companies like Airbnb that have done that successfully as well. So there is a precedent for like taking this design first approach to a business, and I've embodied that 100%. And it does offset that small kind of propensity for me to want to get back into physical product development and creation, along with a bunch of different hobbies that I have where I still make things with my hands.
And you're designing by proxy in some respect, aren't you? You're enabling design through the technology you're selling. And
yeah,
I'm guessing there's, whether you're doing it yourself or someone, there's a lot of consulting as well, I imagine, goes on, and helping customers apply the technology. So you're kind of getting quite a variety. I imagine. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Shay, but it sounds quite fun.
Yeah, I spend a tremendous amount of time with customers. I guess that's like the silver lining. I get to go on site, and I've been into I've been in the design studio of Ducati, for example. I got to see
It's awesome.
the assembly line of Lamborghini when I was. It's all close together in Bologna, there in Italy, and multiple trips to Ford and getting to meet with the folks that are working on the next Bronco, for example. I've been into several of sessions with Nike where they're exploring their new workflow and tool chain and stuff like that. So like these are amazing opportunities that I would not have had being a designer, a single independent designer or a designer within an organization. And so that is also eye-opening. I get so much learning around design at this like very high level in these industries.
Yeah.
And also just talking with designers, like end users, has been incredible. I get to speak with concept artists from the cinema industry to footwear designers. In some respects, there's a bit of art form there as well.
Yeah.
Who are working with athletes. And one of the kind of exciting moments we had last year was the Kyrie Irving basketball shoe that was developed by Anta, a sportswear company in China. And they brought Kyrie Irving into the 3D experience in Gravity Sketch as well. So they showed him his signature shoe in our product, and that's so by proxy I was able to actually have a celebrity within the environment and being able to evaluate and analyze a piece
That's really cool.
piece of design. So these are really awesome experiences that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's awesome. So, how long was it before? Obviously, you had your kind of employee number 3 fairly early on after you left JLR. But how long was it then before you made your first sale and had to start kind of? Because I imagine your business is much bigger now than just the 3 of you. So, how many staff do you currently have?
We're 56 at the moment.
56. Okay.
Yeah.
How's that for you then in terms of kind of your journey, and that's quite a sizable number, isn't it, to look after?
Yeah. Leadership skills have always had to kind of be something you constantly work at, and I've always had to try to level up every generation of growth. I think there's like a pinch point around 12 where it's like, okay, we got to get more of a business, like make sure everyone's salaries are paid on time and all that good stuff. And then at 25, it was another kind of pressure point where you got to kind of, okay, I'm actually being looked to for a lot of answers rather than these small huddles where we can kind of look to each other. But how do you create those? How do you still create that in an environment that's kind of breaking up different teams and like making sure that team leads and making sure there's some alignment sessions? And then as you grow bigger, it's really about creating an operating system for your business. And that's been something that's been at the front end of all of the leadership team here at Gravity Sketch. We spend a lot of time just kind of thinking about how we want to run the business on a daily basis. A lot of folks use OKRs. There's other methods as well. We're adopting these tools as well to try to figure out how we run the business and keep the culture. But initially, we were 3 for a very long time. We were 3 until we got our fundraising in 2018. But prior to that, you mentioned the first sale, and did a kind of a bit of a tricky thing when we first went out and raised money. A lot of people were really critical of any kind of revenue numbers that you had, especially raising money here in the UK or in Europe in general. They want to base the valuation of your business on the revenue and not necessarily the future potential in many cases. And, it's not to speak illy about anyone. It's just the realities of raising money here versus raising money in Silicon Valley or even New York. And so we didn't want to push any kind of revenue figure in front of an investor because we knew we were going to be tied to a growth number or tied to, the value of the business versus the opportunity of the business. So what we did was, and we knew we couldn't survive without having users on the platform. This is like, how are you actually going to justify spending all this time on building something if you don't have people that are constantly giving you feedback? And so what we decided to do is open up the software for beta use via a donation link on PayPal. And so we opened it up on Steam, which is a gaming platform, spend a lot of time in Instagram and these different design communities and say, hey, we're building this thing. Donate £25 and you'll get access to it, and you'll stay along the journey with us. And many of those people are with us today. But within the first month, we did about 10 grand in donations. And so when we went to pitch for investment, we said, hey, look, we have 10 grand in donations. That's just from 1 month. It's not revenue. It's just people that want to support the project. And out of those folks, we had folks from Ford, we had folks from Honda and Volkswagen. And it was like, okay, and these are also credible people in the design world
Yeah.
who are looking for this solution. And so that built a lot of conviction as well. And I often tell other founders who are looking to start their business that the first investor in your business is yourself. And so anything that can give you more conviction that this is the right thing to do, giving up your steady career and putting money into your pension to following this dream and bootstrapping for, in our case, about 3 years. Anything you can do to kind of really convince yourself of that, you should do that before you kind of jump head first, and also before you take other people's money in, because then it starts to become a shared business, not just you
Yeah.
and your co-founder. And so we did a lot of that work, and I'm happy that although they were tough years, they were really rewarding and really exciting to kind of be on that journey in those early days.
You're laying the foundations. You're probably benefiting from all that graft and sweat and tears kind of in the first few years, where you're probably questioning decisions kind of
Absolutely
daily.
Yeah. And you're not tied into anything, so you're
No.
also, it's also like, okay, cool, if this doesn't work, then it was, our learning is all that we kind of take away. And
Yeah.
I try to keep that same mentality even after multiple rounds of fundraising and staff. And so I think also being transparent and keeping that culture as the company scales has been something that we've aspired to do. Like, we want to always try to learn ahead of just trying to hit a revenue target or trying to push some exciting new feature. Let's make sure that we're continually learning. And most startups fail, and so that's a very very clear reality that we need to face. But I think you only fail when you stop trying. And so as long as we're happy to continue trying, we can definitely achieve this goal.
That's awesome. You just reframe what failure looks like, and as long as you're hitting your objective of always learning and always pushing forward, you're never going to fail. It's a fantastic mindset to have.
Yeah, think about this. Like, every single child falls before they can walk. And so, like, if you accept failure, or if your parents accepted failure, then you'd still be crawling, right? And like, that's the crazy thing. So it's like, that's the first thing that we have to face when we're born and brought into this world, is like a constant series of failures. And at some point, failure is not an option, which is a little bit bizarre, because it's actually a tool for learning. And I guess what's not an option is quitting. And like, there's multiple ways to quit, but in our opinion, like, quitting would be completely throwing in the towel when there's still opportunities for learning and growth.
Absolutely. Have you read Go for No by any chance?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's a sales, but it's written like a short story, but they cite that example of kind of you've just got to reframe what failure is. Kids, like children, babies, don't have any kind of concept of failure. They just get up and try again and keep going until they win. And as we get older, we become fearful of falling over, so we do everything to prevent that, include not take as many risks. So it's but the risks and the kind of the getting up and trying again and keep going, that's where the excellence kind of lies and where the opportunities are. So yeah, if you're interested in sales, it's more of a mindset, kind of not being beaten down by kind of everyone goes for the yes, but actually a lot of people stop when they get to no, but the yeses are kind of at the end of the journey through a series of no's. They probably do a better job of explaining that. But
that's good. I like it.
That's really cool. So where you're at now then, I mean, you've had some tremendous successes. As I cited one in the intro there, I mean, having your tool used in a major kind of Hollywood feature, so the Avatar movie. Yeah. Were you aware did they involve you in that, or was that just kind of they just bought the product? And
yeah, and this is the power of community. And so I'm glad that, like, we talk about accolades in the sense of people that are using it for practical needs versus like the amount of money we've raised or how much revenue we have. I think these are important metrics to show a business success. But when you're a business that's on the front end of this technology wave, I mean, we just only heard the other day that Android XR is going to become a thing. And so, like, there's just so much stuff that's still growing. Samsung's now getting into this space. So, we're at the front end of this. And so if we were just looking at the KPIs of a normal SaaS business, I think it takes away from the ambition and also the impact that this can have in the long run. And so those things are really exciting to see. And the only way that I think a company like ours can survive through, leading the charge, there's no one really that's trying to build in the same direction as us, is through community building. And we spent a tremendous amount of time making sure that our free product remains free and remains accessible as much as possible to a broad spectrum of users, many of which we don't know, a tremendous amount of many we don't know. And so with that, you end up with all these amazing use cases. And one of the biggest things I learned when making tools, which is, I guess, what I've now dedicated my career to, is that the user tells you how to use the tool. You may have an idea of how the user may use the tool, but actually the user will use the tool in so many interesting and unexpected ways that it's always going to be a surprise. And so this is what happened with the avatar example. It was a user, I think in Discord, he reached out and I think he was having a problem with like some new update that we had made, and it was lacking a feature that we had in the previous update. And so got into the weeds, and all of a sudden we're in a Zoom call and he's showing us these amazing worlds that he's building. I'm talking about, like, I don't know if you saw Avatar Way of Water, but the villages it's all this woven things, right? Like woven structures. Okay. That's all woven in 3D. Like literally someone is weaving this digital rope, right? And it's just like, wow, this is crazy. And so like then you start thinking, okay, the product can kind of go in this direction, or it can kind of build in that direction. And so although we're a 56-person team, we're actually like a 400,000 person team if we want to include the people that use our product regularly. Like that is the size of our team, because we get those insights and we get, we're on this journey together. This isn't, a slow moving giant like some of the other software companies. We're quite nimble still. We can add some things, we can take some things away. We can think about it from the first principles versus carrying all this baggage of like legacy code and features and processes. And that's been extremely advantageous. So that's just one example. There's another woman who's based in Taiwan who's scanning like war victims, or I don't know exactly how to express them, but people that served in the military that have lost limbs, scanning them, designing in VR with them their prostheses. So they have a prosthesis that better fits their needs, right? Or also their style. So it's like this very emotional use case. And then it was also used in the Chicken Run film, or sorry, Chicken Run? Yeah, the most recent animation, right? And so the animators were making themselves the size of chickens so they can better understand, the environment. So these are all these crazy use cases where I had this very firm industrial design mindset, but now it's creation, it's 3D communication that spans so many different disciplines and so many different walks of life.
That's incredible. And, obviously, I'm a big advocate for physical product design. It's kind of you coming onto the show, obviously out of context is a little bit alien because you're a software brand, but I think the way that you interact with the physical world is incredible. But I just want to say, in terms of my experience working with small agile software businesses, it is exactly what you've just said in terms of, you've got that direct feedback loop. And I think that there's so many exciting kind of innovations in kind of software as a service now. And I love trying new tech for my business as well. And it's invaluable to me having that feedback loop, because I know that business cares about its customers. And if there's something that's bugging me about the experience, I know that they're going to listen, because they're precious about kind of the experience and creating something that people want. Whereas you work with kind of big companies, the big multinational corporates have got tens of thousands of employees, and it's all about the customers that are spending the most money with them, as opposed to the kind of the individuals, the solopreneurs, so to speak. But that's wonderful. So looking forward then, Seyi, you've had obviously a really kind of interesting kind of 10 years or so now with Gravity Sketch. What are you most excited about for the next 12 months?
Next 12 months, I'll break down my kind of motivations and excitement in 3 categories. And I'll start with the most important. Most important is team. And I'm just really excited with this team that we're entering 2025 with. We've been through quite a bit on this journey, and we've brought in a couple of individuals that are going to add more color to our culture and also add more ambition to what we're trying to achieve in terms of our impact on the design community. And also, we've year on year just kind of growing closer and faster with our iteration process. So I'm really excited to see how we engage as a team with our community and how our team flourishes and grows as creatives and engineers and commercial folks. And yeah, there's like a really tight bond that we've started to create and a really good motion that we have. And I say team intentionally. I feel like it's a sports team that's kind of getting together, and in their rookie year they're a little bit rusty, and then they start really kind of figuring out how to move the ball. And
Yeah.
I feel like this 2025 is kind of our breakthrough year where we really know how to work as a team and accelerate what we're doing at every dimension. So that's like the big excitement for me, and I think we'll see that through updates across our website, our product, and the way that we work and communicate with our customers. So everyone that is involved with us should feel that over 2025. And the next bit is our customers. There's a couple of amazing projects that we're seeing come to life, and there's a couple of breakthroughs that our customers have had over 24 that are now going to really come to fruition in 25 in terms of real-time collaboration, new workflows where they're incorporating AI throughout the workflow, or they're incorporating teams that normally would only come at the very end of the workflow at the very beginning. So we have a couple of customers that are actually working with their factory partners in Korea and Taiwan in Gravity Sketch at the very design genesis, which is super exciting. So I'm really
Wow.
excited to see how those products come out and like what we learn from that together, because I think that we're going to define a whole new way of make, and with that could potentially turn a whole industry into working more efficiently, faster, and just setting a new precedent. Kind of similar how
Oh, wow.
Adobe set a precedent for using Illustrator in this part of the workflow, for example. And then finally, the product. And so, the product, although in many cases, it's often the founder's most exciting thing to kind of lean into. It used to be mine, but it's kind of maybe the third, because I think if you have a great team, great customers, you're always going to have a great product because you're going to be solving things together collaboratively. But on the product front, there are things that we've identified that I'm really excited coming. We've started to include community content inside of our ecosystem. So if you create something and you're part of the community, you can submit it, and now everyone within the community can access to that. So
That's
the
cool.
asset library and the shared designs, so people can kind of riff off of each other's designs, that's going to be growing quite exponentially over 25. And then in addition to that, we're opening up the platforms you can collaborate publicly with others. So we'll start to see some public collaboration happening between designers. So we built a lot of these features and functionalities for our enterprise customers, and we're kind of at a scale now where we can afford to distribute that to all of our free users as well as our individual paid users. And so that's going to be really exciting, because like people creating wide in the open publicly, designing things together is ultimately going to lead to some amazing insights and also help move this kind of shift in mindset from the solo creator to the team creator. In real-time team creation, I think is something that hasn't really been done before outside of maybe a workshop. So I'm excited to see how that takes form in the digital space.
That's really exciting. It's the next few years are going to be there's going to be a lot of change, lots of fast-paced movement, isn't there? So wonderful. Seyi, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I'd encourage anyone to go and check out your profile and the Gravity Sketch website. And if you've not tried it yet, get yourself on Steam and get the free version. I presume there's still a free version they can.
Yeah, free version on Meta. If you have a Meta Quest headset, it's £300, $300. Buy one. It's free. On Steam, you can use the free version as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, check it out.
And just finally, is there anyone you want to shout out to, or any kind of parting kind of wisdom you want to share with the audience before we sign off?
Yeah, I gave a lot of credit to the community, but I'll just do it again. Our team and the community, this is the real Gravity Sketch, right? It's not just the founder, the folks that use our product every day, and the folks that believed in our product way back when it was a donation, to the folks that are just downloading it today because they're curious. They have played a tremendous role in helping us get to the point that we are today. And we have an amazing team of engineers, designers, commercial folks that are just genuinely curious, passionate, resourceful, and we couldn't have gotten as far as we've gotten without them. So these are really the kind of the building blocks of our company, and I'd be remiss not to give them a mention. And in terms of anyone that is looking to challenge the way that they work and how they design, I think it's inevitable that tools will change and evolve, and we're seeing that now with the wave of AI. I think it's something that we shouldn't run away from as creatives and as designers, but rather master. And when I think of the great designers from our history, they were always at the forefront of technology. Da Vinci was at the forefront of technology. If we're not being part of that conversation, it's going to wash over us, and it's going to become something that we don't want to be. And I've seen it too many times with our software tools where we as designers are trying to shoehorn our workflow into and leverage the tool in our workflow, versus the tool is informed by us, developed by us, and has created the workflow based on our needs. And so I just encourage you guys to chat with us, join our Discord, explore these different tools, and let's figure out what the next wave of software tools look like for our industry.
That's awesome. Seyi, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Why Design. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review wherever you're listening. It really helps others discover the podcast. And while you're at it, why not share it with a friend or colleague who'd enjoy it too? If you'd like to stay connected or explore more about the work we're doing at Kodu, feel free to visit teamkodu.com or connect with me, Chris Whyte, on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.